Welcome to Sound and Vision, conversations with contemporary artists and musicians about the creative process. Here's the host of Sound and Vision, Brian Alfred.
A couple personal things to let you know about up front. My solo show, Escape Plan, opens next Thursday, March 17th at Miles McHenry Gallery. Come by the opening at 5 to 7 p.m. at 511 West 22nd Street. A fun fact about 511 West 22nd Street, it was where I had my first show in New York City in 1999 at then Max Protech Gallery. So it's been a long time coming since I've showed again at this space, and excited to show a bunch of new paintings and an animation called Escape Plan based on a lot of imagery over the past couple years being in quarantine. So check that out. Also, big news, the Sound and Vision podcast book is available for pre-order. Why I Make Art offers readers an intimate, contemplative view from 30 remarkable creators with compelling stories, entertaining and thoughtful anecdotes, examining themes as varied as music and skateboarding, immigration and statelessness, community and identity. Artists included Diana Al-Hadid, Jules de Balancourt, Gregory Crutzen, Heather Day, Inka Essenhai, Amir Falah, Louis Fertino, Dominique Fung, Carl Funk, Allison Janae Hamilton, Loie Hallowell, Khalil Robert Irving, Chris Martin, Tony Metelli, Jeff McFederidge, Liz Nielsen, Carl Ostendar, Aaron Riley, Devin Shimoyama, James Sienna, Colleen Smith, Robin Williams, Salman Tour, and many more. There's images of the artist's work and even some of the guest book sketches that artists have made after our podcast. There's some really great quotes in there. And my old friend Rishi, who you may know from the Song Exploder podcast and the Netflix series, was kind enough to write the foreword to the book. If you go to soundandvisionpodcast.com and click on the S&V book page, you can find info and a link to Atelier Editions, who's publishing the book, and pre-order a copy today. I'm hoping it's a big source of inspiration for people. It was fun to put together. It's taken a long time, but I'm really excited for this podcast to exist outside the audio realm and in the book realm. So check it out on the soundandvisionpodcast.com website. Sound and Vision is sponsored by Golden Artist Colors. Golden makes some of the best acrylic paints and mediums that you can use. They also make core watercolors and Williamsburg oil paints, which are equally exceptional. You can find them at your local art store or online at goldenpaints.com. Sound and Vision is also sponsored by Fulcrum Coffee Roasters. Seattle-based Fulcrum makes incredible coffee which you can get delivered to your door. Check out their coffee at fulcrumcoffee.com and use the code ALFREDSTUDIO for 20% off your order. That's an exclusive just for Sound and Vision listeners. Check out their site and their coffee today. Andrew Schoultz is an artist born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who lives and works in Los Angeles. He received his BFA in illustration from the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco and has participated in several international solo and group exhibitions, including Joshua Leiner Gallery in New York, Gallery Drost in Germany, and Gallery LJ in Paris. His works represented in important collections such as the LA County Museum of Art, the Berkeley Art Museum, and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. He utilizes a signature style of densely packed, meticulously rendered motifs, archaic war machines, the iconography of the American dollar bill, and cataclysmic events, both natural and man-made, to represent the turmoil of the contemporary world. He makes historic references to antique etchings and Persian miniature painting, as well as William T. Wiley, M.C. Escher, and the Mission School street art. Andrew's art is very much his own, an intense vision of a planet threatened by overcrowding and overconsumption, and societies under siege by the governments that are there to protect them. I spoke with Andrew about skateboarding, the great music shows in Chicago, making murals and making paintings in the studio, and much more. Here's our conversation. was about to happen. It was
Wow.
pretty great.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I mean, I think too, like the one thing in LA where me and Hillary live now, it's like so quiet, right? And for years of living in San Francisco, we lived on the bus line, and so the San Francisco bus line, they have these cables that attach to these like sort of aerial wires that, you know, that's what powers the bus line. But they make
cable car style, right?
Yeah, they make these like whipping noises and then the bus stopping, and so it was like you'd get so accustomed to these pretty aggressive noises all night long, but you just sleep right through it. But nowadays it's like we live so quiet, any noise that comes, you're just like, what's going on, you know? But
that wakes you up.
Got spoiled, but yeah.
I'm a light sleeper, so I love white noise because it just takes anything out. That's, you know, like any sudden noises, I feel like it mutes it a bit because you got that constant white noise.
Right.
Some people, it drives them crazy, though. Like, my wife doesn't like it. She's not into it.
Yeah. I have, like, pretty bad, I don't know, I guess it's called tinnitus. I have it, not terrible, but, like, and it's funny, the more people I talk to over the years, it's like, you know, I talked to different people that were like in the music scene, going to all these shows for all these years. And then along comes the first, versions of the earbud, and then you're blasting music in your ears. And it's like, I don't know very many, you know, people that were going to like crazy shows and all this stuff in the early 2000s and stuff that don't have tinnitus at this point. Like,
Totally.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I definitely remember going to some shows too where go out to eat afterwards after the show or something, and then come back, and then the people in your house are like, dude, why are you shouting? And you're like, oh shit. And then you realize your ears you're totally deaf, you know what I mean?
Everyone's on headphones and cranking it up, and I feel like it's just going to be, everyone's going to have that ringing going on in their head.
Yeah, it's like I can zone it out at this point, and again, mine's not that bad. So it is what it is, but my dad also has pretty bad ears from years of flying in little tiny planes that weren't pressurized, so he has hearing aids and stuff. So I worry about it sometimes, but it is what it is.
Yeah. What are you gonna do?
Yeah.
It's just
one of the five senses. That's all.
Yeah, that's overrated. I mean, I went to shows that I remember when I was young where my ears were ringing for days.
Yeah.
Like, how much in that one night? Like, how much did My Bloody Valentine take away from my permanent hearing?
Oh wow, you got to see them play? Wow. I never got to see them play. But I will say this, one where mine were knocked out for almost a year, or not a year, a week, was when Dinosaur Jr. reunited. I think it was around 2006, and they played the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco, and they had like the full-on stack of like amps, like all floor to ceiling and behind them, and like I couldn't hear. I couldn't hear for like a week after the show.
I'm sure you're probably seasick after that. Jay Mascis, like maybe you can send him a letter and say, I want some of my hearing back.
I think he's probably missing it too, though.
Oh yeah. How could he have any hearing at this point?
Right.
Some musicians, you're just like, unless they have those pro like earplugs,
right?
Which then it's like, why are you turning up so loud if you're just gonna plug your ear? It doesn't make any sense.
For sure. And I guess too, it's like when you're young, you're just stupid. You're like, it's fine, I'm just gonna listen, blah blah blah. And then you get older and you're like, shit, probably should have they were giving away free earplugs, probably should have used them.
I know,
but,
right?
It's whatever.
It's hard when you're young, know, and you don't want to be that kid who's like 15 years old at the Fugazi show who's like, hold on, guys, I have to put in my earphone,
Yeah.
Or you're wearing giant like NASCAR race like earmuffs to like block the noise.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's like funny though too, because it's like I remember times putting them in and like having like a less optimal experience at the show because of it. So I don't know. But I remember there were young kids even in like the music scenes I was in that were teenagers, and they were just religious about it, so, and they probably have really good hearing in their 40s.
Good parents. They had good parenting.
Yeah.
I was occasionally jamming toilet paper in my ears whenever I felt really sick from how loud the music was.
Right. I definitely did that myself too, but yeah, I don't know.
Did you play? Did you grow up playing music?
No, I tried, but no, I didn't really. I just messed around with it, But I definitely was heavily involved in throughout my life, I would feel like I've always gotten lucky in terms of these weird little moments and different things that I've just, because I'm in the right place at the right time, I got to experience it, and so, one of those times was, 95, 96, 94-ish Chicago, the whole music scene that was going on there. And just by chance, I was starting to get into more of this, post hardcore, post punk, all this kind of stuff. And then it just so happened, go to a couple shows to see bands that I knew of. And then, that's how it used to work back then, is you go to see the band you want to see, and then you end up watching a bunch of bands open up, and that used to be the way you would learn about new shit that you liked, so it just so happened, started going down to shows in Chicago there was a really great venue there for years and years and years called the Fireside Bowl. And a lot of times it was all ages, they would have all ages, and then they would have, 21 and over, stuff like that. But, so I started going there and just kind of really, just dove right into that whole scene down there. And, it was just amazing, because on a lot of levels, it was just okay, you go to see this random band, whatever, friend's band called Hubcap. And then, Steve Albini just showed up, and Shellac's going to play a set after they're done. And you're just what? It's just crazy stuff like that was happening down there kind of on a regular basis for a while. And just sometimes not even knowing who the bands were, but just I'm going to stick around and check this out. And then all of a sudden your eyes are open to this whole other world or whole other kind of genre, or whatever you want to call it, of bands, or a whole other scene. And, for me, I just, now in hindsight, just looking back on it, I just feel really fortunate that I got to sort of witness a lot of the stuff that I got to witness. And, and then it's funny because you think about it too. And especially in Chicago, there was a lot of kids that were either late high school or, early college, we're talking 17 to 21 ish. And they were all forming bands and playing, and these bands were just so short-lived, but they made amazing shit, that no one was doing at the time. And, and so just to be able to be there to see this band that formed for 6 months and made an amazing record or something that, whatever, just to get to see that for me was just super amazing. And there was a band that was pretty short-lived in terms of the bigger picture, but Cap and Jazz, I don't know if you're familiar with them, or yeah.
I mean, I know my friend was in Joan of Arc.
So. Oh, nice. Awesome. I love them too. But so they kept going with all the stuff they were doing, but the couple years that Cap and Jazz was around, I mean, it was insanity. Words cannot describe going to one of these shows. And I kind of, discovered them just going to a show in Milwaukee, actually, where I'm from originally. And I was into this band because a girl I was dating called Small Factory. And so they were playing at the record shop, Atomic Records. And so they played an in-store thing. And then they were playing at the Unicorn. And lo and behold, Cap and Jazz was the opener. And I just went in there, and my mind was blown. I was just what the fuck is this? And from then forward, it was just like anytime they played, and I would go, and it would just be like this. They would come and play, a house on the east side of Milwaukee, and you would have like 1,000 kids showing up to see this band play. And then lo and behold, if they were playing at the Fireside or a Chicago venue, it was just like for insanity, you know what I mean? And so, it's just whatever. It was just this short-lived thing. And, all those guys went on to do some of other stuff that was like some of my favorite stuff too. Like Victor Villarreal, the guitar player, went on to do like Ghosts and Vodka, and then they did Owls for a while. And they, all the projects that they did are just so amazing, and they just constantly were evolving, which I think is also really, for me as an artist, or when you're looking at like art, music, or whatever, skateboarding or anything, it's like, it's cool to see the evolution, like just the way things kind of slowly change, and then they kind of meander, and then they come back to something that's more familiar, or all these different things. And I really think they did that, like Tim Kinsella and all those guys just did that so amazingly.
Yeah, you were at like the right place at the right time with that.
For sure. I mean, it really, definitely was a life-changing moment for me, and just sort of changed the direction of my like musical interests too. Like, and nowadays it's just like I like everything, but when you're young, you get into your like very specific thing, and nothing else can kind of like come into that. It's just like it's either part of this or you don't want nothing to do with it, So but at least that's how I was.
The band that I was in played a lot. The record label we were on was in Chicago, and we recorded at Electrical, and there's a long history of like music stuff in my life that, paralleled making art.
Right. What band? Forgive me I should probably know it, but what band were you in?
Oh, no one knows it. It was called 33.3. We were it was guitar, cello, and drums. So it wasn't like,
that's cool.
We played with a lot, when we toured, we played with bands like 33 and Ariel M.
Oh, wow. Amazing. But
that genre, you know what I mean, of kind of like mixed instrumentation, and, because we had a cellist, so it turned us into, a band that would get put on bills with like any exotic instrument.
I hear you.
But we played with like Erebon Radar one time in Pittsburgh.
Nice.
And like we played with like,
that's amazing.
Black Heart Procession and bands like that. So, but yeah, that connection of music and art at this, it sounded like you had that. I mean, you weren't in the band playing, but you were sort of like creatively inspired and a parallel route to making things. And you started skateboarding when you were young, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
Because it seems like it's big for you.
I started skating in 1985, actually. And now,
how old were you then?
I was 10 years old. It was on my my spring break of my 5th grade year, and I got a shitty Veriflex skateboard for Easter. So it was,
what's a Veriflex? I don't know.
It was like a big brand in like this early brand in the like, I want to say in the late 70s, but then they were one of the first brands that just streamlined and started making like really cheap boards to put in like Targets and like, those type of places, Kmart's and stuff like that.
That's the same kind I had.
Well,
I had like a little plastic, like crappy, and it came to a point in the front of it. That was my first skateboard. It wasn't for tricks or whatever.
Well, mine was wood. Mine was wood. It had trucks, and it looked like
you were one up on me.
Yeah, and so, but that was, that was my the first one that I got, and then slowly but surely. Well, actually, by the summer of that year, then I had like sort of graduated on, and then had skateboard magazines, and then they had the California Cheapskates ads, and so my first like a real board was a Vision, the classic Vision Mark Gonzalez.
And
one
with the
with
stripes around the portrait.
Yeah, the face. Yeah, and so it was amazing.
Nice.
It was amazing to have that for my first board, but also it was like I ordered it through the mail order, like 4 to 6 weeks delivery. So you're like, got it done.
Anticipation.
You're sitting there waiting for it to come, and like, that kind of thing. And then And then it finally came, and it was like, it was so beautiful. I didn't even want to set it up and skate it. You know, you're like, no, I can't ruin it.
It's artwork.
Like, yeah. I mean, that's how it felt. And then, you know, and at the time, like the tricks weren't insane or whatever, but yeah, I decked that thing out with rails, and there were rails on the tail, a nose guard, a tail skid, like had that thing so
weighed a ton.
Yeah,
probably
exactly.
weighed like 20 pounds.
Exactly. Yeah. So
I didn't have enough money for all the accoutrement, but I do remember my first board. I think everyone remembers their first real board, you know. Mine was a Foundation Joe Lopes barbecue model.
Wow.
It was like a cartoon of a guy grilling like hamburgers.
Yeah, I know the one.
Yeah, so but yeah, those are early memories. But Gon's was like, you know, that was artwork.
Yeah.
You know, I remember a board that I have of his, which was just like a portrait of someone here looking at someone here, and they were like cartoony, and one guy was bald and the other one was a woman, I think, and it was like, it meant, I don't know why, it just meant so much, that skateboard. The image of it and the feel of it was just so funky. Yeah, I love that stuff. Man.
Yeah, and even the smell of them, like, because they used to use such toxic inks to print them and stuff, and they were all silk screened and stuff like that. And so I'd still remember, because I didn't set my Mark Gonzalez board up for like probably a couple weeks at least, maybe a month, maybe even longer. But I still just always remember the smell, and like every once in a while I'll go in some silk screen shop or something, and you're like, the smell, Mark Gonzalez Vision board, like, you know. But it's funny. I mean, I remember most of my boards, and then, you know, up until a point, and then you start ripping through them.
Right.
And then you don't really remember. But a lot of the boards, too, from like back then, too, if you happen to own one of those now, they're worth so much money. It's crazy.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Should have kept a couple of those.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, when our hearing goes, we can have the sense of smell of nostalgia, you know? Like, remember, I'm probably guessing at some point in your life you were, you know, in school and like in an art studio, and you had that oil paint smell, like in the classroom.
Oh yeah.
Like the turpentine smell, and it takes you right somewhere. You know, and sometimes I'll go to a show. I mean, I work with water-based media now, but sometimes I'll go to a show in like Chelsea or something, and there's a painting where there's a lot of thick paint, and you get hit with that nostalgia
100%.
of oil paint smell.
Yep, 100%.
Takes you back.
Yeah. That just happened when I actually going to see the Eddie Martinez show here in LA at Blum and Poe.
Oh yeah.
Still, I could still smell the oil like on the paintings.
Yeah. But he lays it on thick, right?
Yeah. And what do they say? Like, some of that stuff, when you put it on that thick, it takes like something like 30 years to cure, something like that. Like,
I'm sure
100 like to 100%. Like, you know, cure or whatever. But I don't use any of that stuff either, and use only water-based stuff. But I don't know. I'm jealous of people who use that stuff, and I've tried to like detoxify my studio like 100% since for the last 10 years. Like there was a certain point where I was just using so much toxic weird shit because I was like, I thought I had to or something like that, you know. Some of those materials were like carry over from being like a graffiti writer and stuff like that, where you're like, oh, this ink that I use on the street, I gotta use this on my paintings or whatever. And then slowly but surely you're like, this stuff is gnarly, you know. And then you want to get rid of it. Yeah. And you know, it is what it is. I mean, but you know, the body can cure itself. You just have to like rid the toxicities that are surrounding it first, and then it can start to heal itself. But
exactly, yeah.
But
I'm always amazed at that statistic of like people who smoke cigarettes. Like when you quit, they say something like, in 5 years you can reduce the damage of like 80% or something. I was like, damn, that's pretty good, all things considered.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that one in particular, I don't even understand why anybody wants to do that one anymore. And I did it for many years. Me and Hillary actually met smoking a cigarette. Like, I bummed a cigarette off her. That's literally how we kind of met.
There you go.
We were actually
the entryway.
Yeah, we were actually meeting a friend of ours that both of us were friends with to go to the luggage store 20-year anniversary show, and a friend of ours that we were meeting, we were both meeting at the same place. She hadn't showed up yet, and so over a cigarette. That's how I met my wife.
There you go. Yeah, but these days it's like, when you see someone smoking, it's almost weird. Like, really, you're gonna still do that? It would be like when we were growing up, the people like, meeting someone who's like 18-year-old smoking a pipe. You'd be like, what the hell? It's like going back in time or something.
Yeah. But I mean, it's weird. It's weird too, because I don't know if you have the same feeling or if you ever smoked, but it's like the only time I ever feel a little bit like, oh, give me one of those things is when you're in Europe for some reason, like in Paris.
Oh, really?
Or like, and it's like you smell it and I don't know. And somehow it just feels right over there, but I don't know. I have no aspiration in me anymore to smoke a cigarette.
Yeah, fortunately I never got into it, It
Wow.
never took.
Yeah.
I think I had 8 in my life and I was never a big fan.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Dodge that bullet.
Yeah.
Coffee, however,
even in a band, even in a band, that's going to.
Yeah, we weren't smokers, Just none of us smoked, which was advantageous.
Yeah, for sure.
Sometimes it only takes one.
But they were cheap. They were cheap back then, so.
That's true. I know. Like when you see in New York City the prices for those things, I'm like, really? You're gonna commit to that?
$18 or something.
It's an expensive way to take yourself out.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's not
fast food's much cheaper for that.
Yeah.
So when did you start making stuff?
I mean, I've been making stuff ever since I was very young, but I guess I would say I got serious about making stuff probably around, I don't know, high school-ish. I went to a high school in Milwaukee that had a very progressive art program, actually. And so it was a Catholic high school called Pius XI. And so, that was one of the things that kind of drew me to go to the school. I don't know, little backstory about me. Going into high school, I was heavily skateboarding at the time, and I was pretty introverted, pretty socially awkward. I was into, drawing comic book type stuff or whatever, and skateboard graphic kind of stuff and graffiti stuff and whatever. And so when we were, checking out all the different high schools around Milwaukee, and then I kind of saw that as a possibility to go there, immediately I was like, oh, this looks great. And so, I was fortunate to end up going to a high school where there was actually a very progressive arts program and, really progressive art teachers there. And it felt like it was important too. I think that's something that you can't really understate sometimes when it comes to a lot of things is especially when you're a kid, I think it's really important to feel like you're doing something important, and
right.
Oftentimes, you hear this kind of narrative of the football players are the cool guys and then whatever. And, that was definitely true at the high school I went to too, but there was a place for all of us kind of weirdo skateboarder, at the time there was a lot of goth girls and stuff like that went to my high school, and a lot of us, we were in all the art classes, and so it was cool. And the way the program the way the scheduling for my high school, it was more set up like a college, if that makes sense. You got to kind of choose the classes you wanted to take, and you had to mandatory take a certain amount of years of math and this and that, but then you had electives, and so not everybody was going to be in art class. You had to choose to be in art class. That was a good way to sort of feel like there was some type of, I guess, future in trying to pursue art through that. I mean, through my high school.
You're kind of lucky in that sense because.
Yeah.
And I would never have pegged a Catholic school as having like a robust art program.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting.
It's kind of a funny, cool combination, you know?
Yeah.
Like usually God and art, I don't know if they, Jesus and art are thrown together that much.
Yeah.
Maybe back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I never even thought about that, but yeah. But you're right.
Well, it's funny, and to your point of like, it's really advantageous and kind of a gift to feel that art is given a place of meaning, of value in an early age, because so often art class is the place where you just go like scribble and it doesn't mean anything. But the irony is like you're saying, like football is considered this really important, like it's a game, and that's the really important thing.
Right.
And the class where kids are trying to express their feelings or get some sort of expression out is like, a joke.
Yeah.
It's like a messed up like algorithm. It's like the opposite of what it should be.
Yeah, and I don't know. I really don't know if it's still like that, And I have like kind of like I guess again, it's like it's kind of just by circumstantial luck that like I skateboard still like really hardcore here in LA, and my age group of friends ranges from anywhere from like a 8-year-old kid to like teenagers that are in high school to like 20-somethings to 30-somethings, and I'm in my 40s, to even guys that are even older than me. So it's kind of cool in that way that like I'm just around this huge like spectrum of like age group. So it's like you get the perspective of what the teenagers are thinking. You get the perspective of like what, and at this point in time too, it's like most people in their 20s are pretty insane, It's like, and when I look back at how I was in my 20s, I'm like, wow, I was crazy, you know what I mean? But I think it's, like sometimes I feel like too, just based on other friends that I have that maybe don't skateboard or whatever, or they're not around some type of a scene where they're around like a largely diverse, like and that's the other thing too, is it's like culturally too, it's like I'm around just so many different walks of life, from so many different economical classes just through skateboarding alone. And, and I feel lucky about that because it really gives me like a very large perspective on like just where people are at, whereas I feel like a lot of people are just sort of surrounded by like the people that do the same stuff that they do and are around the similar age and, and are pretty much like-minded to them or like this or that. And then, and you see kind of, or just in conversation, you can easily pick up pretty quickly, like, like people have their mind made up about what's what and this and that. And I do feel fortunate in the fact that even sometimes I'll talk to some teenage kid in high school and he'll like change my mind about what I should think about, say, some rapper or something, and I'll be like, oh, right. Oh shit, I never really thought about it like that, and then I like go and listen to it, and then I'm like, oh, you know what, this is cool, or whatever. So I don't know, it's interesting, and I feel fortunate about that.
I agree with you, and I have it's not quite as connected with creativity as skateboarding, but I run a soccer club with a friend, and I'm around kids from ages like 7 years old all the way up to 18, and it's so good to be around those other people and to hear those voices and to get your head out of it. I think so many artists are just in the studio all the time, so it's like you and you.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, it's good in a way because you can really like marinate in your own like creativity or whatever, but after a while it becomes like a feedback loop.
Yeah, I would agree with that. No, and that is awesome. I mean, on a certain level too, it's like I'm sure you get to sort of chime in and be to somewhat extent a role model for these kids that you are in the soccer club with or whatever. Totally. And and that's like I think that's a pretty beautiful thing in a lot of respects because like when you're growing up, I don't necessarily always think your parents can always answer every question or this or that. And, and I find myself in situations where I'm kind of giving advice to younger kids or this or that. And, even throughout that process, many times it's like I learn stuff about myself as well, or whatever, it goes in so many directions from that point. But I do think, being in some sort of a community of sorts and being able to have like a positive effect on, a younger generation of kids or people, it's like, it's a really amazing thing that, a lot of times you can even take that for granted. But, at this point, I don't really take anything for granted anymore.
Yeah. I completely agree with you. And I feel like too, that process of like having that engagement with that larger community in a way takes a little bit of the pressure off in the studio.
Yeah.
I don't know, for some reason I'm just like, you know what? I'm going to do what I want to do. And like it's almost like you're not putting all your eggs in one basket as far as the way you communicate to the world.
Yeah. I would say 100%. And, and I lived like that for many years. All I did is just grind in the studio, grind. Like
me too.
And, and it did get me to, it got me somewhere, and I have no regrets about that. But on another level too, it's like, you're just like burning the candle at both ends. And after years and years and years of that, it's like I kind of found myself in a place where, just like not super happy or fulfilled in what I was doing, or like just now it's like, yeah, I'm in the studio. I'm stoked. I feel blessed, I'm in the studio. I get to make artwork. Like I never am unhappy to be in the studio. And I just kind of remember after, just grinding for probably close to 10 years, just like not enjoying it anymore, and just like constantly having this worry about how do I get to this next level? How do I get to this next level? And, all of a sudden it's like, you're like, oh, you get to this, you see this place you want to get to, like with your art career. And then you arrive at said place and then you realize, oh, actually the place I want to get to is up there. And then and it's just like, it continues that way. Like for me anyway, it just seemed like I never got to a place where I was like, oh, okay, this is where I want to be. It just seemed like I would move forward and then I would realize that I needed to go further and I needed to keep going further and further. And it just seemed like it never ended, and
yeah.
For me, I finally found myself in a place with that where I wasn't very happy and I was definitely not living a healthy life, and found myself, 50, 60 pounds overweight, like, just not even thinking about it either, just like whatever, this is what I'm doing and not doing really anything besides art and like, ditching out on stuff that I should have been doing with friends or family because, I need to be in the studio. I need to be in the studio, rushing out of the house every day, go to the studio, get back to the house, work on stuff at the house. Like, just neglecting like your family, your friends, all these things just because you're in like this pursuit of this thing, which, come to find out is really nothing more than a glorified rat race. And so, and for me, it was like, unless I was to like go through all that, I don't think I would have ever realized it. And, and that's what a lot of times in life for me anyway, it's like been like, you find yourself in a dark place, but like, when you find yourself in the dark place, it's time to like kind of maybe learn something about yourself. And then when you finally find yourself out of that dark place, you have to remember that place you were in that dark place,
right,
and take that in consideration to the way you want to live your life in the future. And, that was definitely a part of my whole journey with just being an artist and sort of just getting perspective on like what is important to me in my life, and one of those things is my family. And, and my parents and my wife and my child and her parents and so on and so forth. And, and these are things that maybe I wasn't, maybe I was taking those things for granted for a while and stuff like that. So, and it's funny too, because like, quite honestly, it's like I run into people or artists around LA or wherever, anywhere really. And I can just pick up almost immediately, like within a 5-minute conversation, if they're in that place. And there's so many
there's so many artists. What you're talking about.
There's so many artists that are exactly in that place, and I can just like I can see it from a mile away. I'm just like, oh shit, you're in that place, like. And there's no,
and you want to tell them, but you can't.
And
right?
there's nothing you can tell somebody to like make them understand. They have to like learn it on their own. It's like a friend of yours in a bad relationship with a guy or a girl. You're just like, there's nothing you're gonna tell them at that moment to make them go, you need to get out of this. But then later on, hopefully, they learn and and again, it's like not passing judgment. It's not to like say there's something wrong or this or that. It's just like I suddenly kind of realized after just really grinding so hard at this art thing for, well over a decade that like, to put it very simply, there is more to life than making art. You know what I mean? It's my passion. Right. I love it more than anything. I feel, very grateful and blessed and to be able to do it and somehow make a living off of it. But like, there is more to this thing called life than just sitting in your studio being a genius, so to speak. So
no, I totally agree. And don't you feel like, because I had basically when I got out of school, and I was lucky enough to start showing pretty shortly after. So I was living off my work, and I was just making work. And I did that for like almost like 10 years of a block of just like working constantly. And then I had a kid, and that changed the whole ball game,
Right.
And it sort of recontextualized everything. But I feel like, and I had a professor who was kind of like, a mentor to me. And he was like, just be careful not to burn out. And I didn't know what he was talking about. I'm just loving this. I get to work all day. And, but now I kind of see, but I feel like the life experiences that you're talking about that's bigger than just only making art, like the family, the travel, like the doing other things. I feel like that's what feeds the work in the long run anyways. So in other words, it's like the feedback loop. Like you want to stay out of that, just like, me and my brain every single day doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, 100%. And like also too, it's like it feeds the work, but it's also like getting space from the work, having time to just think about ideas and things before you just like make the thing. But also too, it's just like, like taking care of your health, like taking care of your, your temple, so to speak. It's like very important, and especially the older you get. And, and I think what you just said, like I remember people kind of saying that to me too, or to some version of that don't burn out thing. And I remember I was, when I first like sort of moved to San Francisco, I kind of got in the mix with like different, like the mural projects going on there and like the nonprofit arts institutions and stuff like that around San Francisco. And I immediately kind of indulged myself in the community. And I did meet a lot of the like more, they were just not so much super older than me, but just enough older that they were like a generation before me, perhaps, and these were kind of people there that like sort of took me under their wing a little bit, like a artist named Aaron Noble and another artist named Alicia McCarthy. There are different people. And like, so, it was just funny because like, just to be around that and see them and then just be like, oh, I'm like going for it. And then like sort of I remember them, just some of them kind of even looking at me like, wow, this guy's insane. Like what, don't burn out kind of thing as well. But, I guess you can only learn through experience sometimes. And that's,
But then you have to go through it.
Right.
It's kind of like, when you skateboarding and like all you care about is landing the handrail or the trick, and you obsess over that and you get stressed out about it. And then at the end of the day, like years later, you realize, oh, it's just hanging out with my friends. That was what it was all about.
Yeah.
It's like going out and seeing the city and doing stuff.
For sure.
So, it's in the moment, you can't see the forest from the trees, really.
Right. No, and I actually use that phrase quite often, too, but it's, I mean, it's important, I think, always now for me to just like enjoy like the moment I'm in. And that was the other thing too, with the whole like grind. It was like often, and I tell a lot of people too that are like having a lot of success or whatever, like just make sure you enjoy the ride, like, because at times I have very fond memories of all the crazy stuff I did and trips and murals and all this crazy stuff. I have fond memories, but oftentimes, I remember just sort of not really being present in those moments and really enjoying the moment of doing a lot of things, and nowadays I'm like, I really try to enjoy the moment I'm in. And like, I think it's really easy to just be like so focused on what's the next thing that you're like, forget to enjoy the thing that is now. And
right. Yeah. And living in the moment.
Yeah. And it sounds so cliche, but I think it's so important. And I don't know.
Well, cliches are cliches for a reason.
Right.
I mean, well, as far as the work is concerned, I mean, it sounds like you started off from a more street, combining your activities outdoors and like street stuff. Like, what's the migration of, from when you're a kid, like coming out of high school, going to this really cool art program, and then figuring out how it fits in, like being creative, and how that, changed over time as far as like how you were doing things?
For me, I would prefer to just do it as in like a brief synopsis, but like,
Sure.
I basically got very interested in drawing at a very early age, like we're talking like 4 or 5 years old, because of my dad. My dad would doodle at the table every night, and I started trying to like basically copy off of him. And then shortly after that, around second or third grade, we started to have, me and my brother who's 2 years older than me, we started to have babysitters, when our parents were out doing whatever. And we'd have these babysitters that were like really into comic books, and they would draw comic books. And so, of course, immediately, and, the babysitters are always these cooler guys at junior high guys or high school guys that I was like, oh, this guy's cool. So I, right out the bat looked up to him. So I wanted to emulate them. So I copied off of what they were doing. And then, shortly after that, I sort of basically saw the movie Breakin' and Beat Street and whatever, these things. And then, there's a main character in Beat Street named Ramo who's like, says in the movie basically like, oh, how did you get good at this graffiti thing? It was because he used to trace DC Comics. And then I'm like, well, I do that, so maybe I can do that. And so that kind of led me down this sort of graffiti pathway for, at a pretty early age, like third grade, we're talking fourth grade. And
most early.
Yeah, and mostly at that time, because I was also into the breakdancing element. Like, it was basically me and my brother would do graffiti on big pieces of cardboard that we would breakdance on the cardboard or whatever. And, and then by like around 5th, 6th grade, that's when I kind of got into the skateboarding thing, which basically I got into skateboarding because I was into BMX. And so I got into BMX, and then there was a magazine called Freestylin', and it was more like the flatland freestyling on a bike, tricks on flatland or whatever.
Pegs.
And they were,
right?
yeah, exactly. And then, so they were like slowly starting to integrate skateboarding into that magazine a little bit. And so I was like kind of paying attention to that, and that's what kind of sparked my interest in skateboarding. So basically, up until from like 5th to 8th grade, I would both do BMX and skateboarding. And then by 8th grade, I chose skateboarding over BMX and then sold my bike or whatever. But, you know, and so really like being in skateboarding is kind of like what sort of, I don't know, it took me out of my neighborhood, I guess, so to speak. So like even in Milwaukee, it was like suddenly I'm spending lots of time downtown Milwaukee skateboarding, or like we didn't have skate parks really. So it was all just you're in the street basically. And, you know, my parents kind of liked the idea of me getting out of the neighborhood I lived in, because by the time, you know, I was in the 8th grade, the neighborhood I grew up in was kind of like, it kind of turned into like a not so good neighborhood, if that makes sense, or whatever. And so they were never really bummed to see me leaving the neighborhood and going somewhere else to do what I was interested in or whatever. And then, you know, skateboarding is what it, you know, basically opened my eyes to like all the music I'm into, like all the art. It's what, you know, it was like the gateway to everything, you know. And I guess like it feels funny to sort of state that now, because there definitely has been times in my career where I really kind of like alienated myself from it, or this or that. Like I didn't want to be associated with it maybe, or this or that. But just in hindsight, it's just like it really what like sort of opened up the whole world to me. Because the other thing is too, is like with skateboarding, you know, even on a small scale in a city that you live in, it's taking you to all these other places in the city. And so you're meeting other people in all these other parts of the city. Whereas like, that's not generally a teenager's experience if they're just hanging out in their own neighborhood. And so suddenly I know people on the east side of Milwaukee, the south side of Milwaukee, the west side. I know people from all over the whole city. And, you know, and then right there and then you're like, all of a sudden it's like, you know, your world has just got a little bigger. Then as you get older and you progress and this and that, then maybe I'm going down to Chicago to skateboard, or I'm going to, you know, wherever, like Minnesota or this or that. Then you meet people there, and suddenly this circle of people that you know is like expanding. And then the more people you know, the more influences you have, the more information you have. Because, you know, we grew up in this time where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have social media and like all these different things to just like I'll immediately be informed about things. And so like for me, it was like always awesome to meet another dude who was like into cool music, and then I would learn about other bands that I would have never heard of, or, you know, this or that, like all that kind of stuff, just sort of expanding the world that you live in by like, you know, just relationships and knowing people everywhere. And, you know, and that's pretty much how things went. And then all of a sudden I'm, you know, traveling around, going to all these places through skateboarding. And, you know, and skateboarding is pretty much how I chose to live in San Francisco as well. So that's kind of what brought me to San Francisco. And I was interested in going to San Francisco for two reasons, is because of, you know, for one, it was like a mecca of skateboarding, but it was also a mecca of like graffiti in a lot of ways. And it was not like the typical graffiti. And that's always kind of like the stipulation I make, is it's like, you know, I definitely liked all the New York graffiti and all that stuff when I was younger, but like then I kind of started just through like, you know, ironically through things like Thrasher magazine and stuff would give a little play to like some of this weird stuff that was going on in the streets of San Francisco. And that's kind of what like sort of, and then there were other like graffiti magazines or more like zines that were like covering this stuff. And it sort of opened my eyes to like somebody like a Barry McGee, or, you know, a lot of this other kind of stuff that was going on in San Francisco. And, you know, and so that actually drew me to San Francisco as well. And then, you know, of course, moving somewhere far away from home to pursue skateboarding and graffiti art is not necessarily probably what your parents want to hear. But, you know, so basically I tried to find like a the school I wanted to go to in San Francisco to make it sort of more of a legitimate, a legitimate choice for my parents. Right. And so I basically moved to San Francisco to attend school. But the main things that brought me to San Francisco were, skateboarding and graffiti going on there at the time. And I don't know if I'm just going on and on and on, but quickly getting kind of in the mix in San Francisco with skateboarding and graffiti. All of a sudden, it's like you're meeting so many people, and all of a sudden you're in the mix in this whole new world of all this different stuff. But I would say, for me, moving to San Francisco and sort of just seeing how really how community works on this very small scale was really important for me. And so there's a mural project in San Francisco called the Clarion Alley Mural Project. And basically it's this alley that runs between Valencia Street and Mission and between 18th and 17th Street in San Francisco, the Mission District. And, this project was started by an artist named Aaron Noble, another artist named Rigo. There were a couple other people who their names are slipping my mind right now, but they lived on this alley. And basically this alley was really nothing more than a heroin drug alley or whatever. And so their idea was sort of to start painting murals in it and whatever. And they were all artists attending Art Institute in San Francisco. So they started this thing, and, and I had seen pictures of this place in Thrasher magazine and different things. And then just one night I happened to skate down this place and oh shit, this is that place. And there was a pretty famous mural by Barry McGee in there. There's murals by Alicia McCarthy, Ruby Neary. There were murals by Rigo, Chewy Campesano. And they were really kind of, in a lot of ways too, this project was different because there was a lot of murals and there are a lot of murals in the Mission District. And it's a famous place for murals, but for the most part at this point in time, most of the murals were more of what you would call a traditional Chicano style mural. And so this kind of mural project was this sort of, I guess, the beginnings of more avant-garde art being put in the streets, but maybe in a similar way in that you're just painting walls. It wasn't so institutionalized. For a century, we've seen very avant-garde art get put in our public space, but a lot of times that entails $1 million sculptures that are put in, corporate plazas or, these gigantic multi-million dollar tile projects on buildings or this or that. But this was more of an immediate, someone painted a painting in an alley and it probably took them a week. And so for me, this all just sort of spoke to me. And so I just immediately was wanting to try to figure out how to be involved in this project. But, you sort of can sometimes from the outside looking into things, you think they're maybe more difficult or bigger than they actually are. And so I ended up just sort of contacting this project and then not even expecting to hear anything back, just oh yeah, they'll never get back in touch with me or this or that. And within a day or two, they were oh yeah, come on down and we'll talk, blah, 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 or whatever. And so, and I don't know what it is, but it was to immediately kind of be included in this, community project. And then sort of just seeing how all these different nonprofits, arts organizations, or even political campaigns and all this stuff, in San Francisco, you can really just show up there and get involved with all of this stuff on a ground level, and you can just really make a difference. Yeah. And I don't know what that is because I've yet to sort of experience that anywhere else. Even in LA, it just seems to actually get in the mix on a major level with any of this stuff just seems really, really challenging and difficult. And I think it's kind of set up that way in a lot of ways on in this kind of bureaucratic level or whatever. Whereas in San Francisco, you show up at some guy's office that's running for a supervisor, and they'll put you to work on the spot. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, you fill out this form and like maybe someone will call you or whatever. And, so for me, like, and I guess I'm rambling on about this, but like coming from the Midwest where I never really was involved in any kind of local politics or any kind of really local community organization or anything like that, like, to just sort of show up there and immediately sort of be embraced and accepted into being a part of these things, it felt like really powerful to me. And so like, I guess, for the first couple of years of living in San Francisco, I was really heavily doing a lot of illegal graffiti, and just in a very traditional way too, just writing a name, climbing up buildings, doing rooftops and tagging on things, and doing, very in the most typical way you could really think of. And, after a few years of doing it, and then sort of just kind of having like what I was just talking about, this sort of awakening in terms of like social politics, just being a part of a community organization, and, just having my eyes really opened up about this kind of stuff. I like the idea of just like running around the city, painting my name illegally on things. It just sort of didn't resonate to me as much as it had in my younger years. I like immediately kind of saw like, this sort of narcissistic, whatever you want to say, angle to it. Like, and, I wanted to sort of, I was like, I want to paint walls and I want to paint big things in the public, but I want to like have these things kind of serve a greater purpose, and that was like sort of where I began with doing murals in San Francisco, was on Clarion Alley mural project. And I basically was painting a mural about like the gentrification going on in the Mission District. I ended up taking over a after-school program at Presidi's Mural Arts Center for a few years called the Urban Youth Arts Program, where you're basically working with, anywhere from like 8-9-year-old kids up until later high school kids. I don't like the term at-risk youth, but like a lot of them would probably qualify in terms of that description. But and so I ended up doing that for many years, and and then just slowly but surely, just by like doing some murals in the street, all out of nowhere, like I started to be contacted by some different places that were like interested in me showing work, as well. And
so is that how the transition happened from like basically like outdoor to indoor in a way? Because it sounds like you really, had the social side of things and the community side of things has been so important in different aspects of your life the whole way through. So how did you picked up all that momentum from doing stuff in the public realm that was sort of socially engaged. How does that transition into like you sort of migrating into the studio?
Well, the whole time I was in school, so that's the other thing, is like this whole time I'm like doing all this stuff in the streets and getting into all this mural stuff. I'm like also full-time in school. And so I'm going
like a double life.
Yeah.
Like you had that stuff and then you had the stuff inside too.
Full on double life, like 100%. Like, and, and I pretty much kept to myself at art school, and like, for lack of a better way to say it, it was like, now in hindsight, I look back on it, and it's like, why were people not really interested in being my friend at art school? I was like this, I was like dready white guy with like, who would barely take a shower or change my clothes, and half the time I would show up to like figure painting class like after staying up till 4 a.m, like painting some rooftop, and then just show up there and like, why is everyone looking at me funny or whatever? But now I know, I'm like, oh yeah, I was that guy. But yeah, so I was like double lifing it for sure, but I was like always making stuff, and so to make another long story short, I ended up choosing this school in San Francisco called the Academy of Art And now it's called the Academy of Art University. At the time that I went to the school, it was not even accredited. And, but, I chose it anyway because like I was into comics, I was into graffiti, I was into this like very kind of linear drawing kind of stuff. And I was like looking at the Art Institute, or I was looking at CCAC. It was called CCAC at the time. I think they dropped the C sometime in the last decade or something like that. But I was looking at their programs, and I wasn't seeing anything in their brochures that was like speaking to me, and so like when I saw the Academy of Art stuff, it was like they had this illustration program in there. And so I saw stuff, well, this kind of relates to what I'm interested in. And so that's kind of what sold me on choosing this school to go to. And so, that was the school I ended up being heavily into a lot of these illustration classes, which ended up just being brutal because, it was like, I didn't want to make art where you're given an assignment, like draw this and make it to sell this or whatever. And so, I ended up not really being super stoked on being in the illustration program. So I managed to like figure out a really cool department at the Academy of Art, which was the printmaking department. And so I started taking like silk screening classes and stuff like that, and then made some connections with some of the teachers in those departments who then they saw what I was doing or whatever, and I think they thought, oh, this guy's onto something kind of cool or whatever. And so I was lucky enough to have a lot of these two different printmaking teachers offered me to have like independent study. So like I could get credits by just going there and making prints or whatever. And so I hid out in the silk screen department and the lithography department at that school for many years until I, finally had enough credits to graduate. I was like making a lot of stuff, and I definitely wanted to show work in a gallery at some point. But the other thing was too, is that like really at the time, there were not a lot of galleries even showing like what I would say would fall under like what I was doing at the time. And, so I would just be like approaching like cafes around San Francisco or this or that. And, there was a cafe that I would go to quite often in the Haight-Fillmore district called the Cafe International. I believe it's still there today. And they always had art on the walls. And then at one point I asked them if I could show work there. And then they gave me a date, and then I ended up showing work on their walls at this cafe. Well, again, another thing, it's like little did I know that Daryl and Lori from the Luggage Store Gallery, they lived a half a block down, and they went in this place every day. And so suddenly then they saw my work, and they liked it, and then they ended up offering me to do something in the windows of their space. And so that was how I kind of met them. And, and again, it's all these things just sort of like connected, in these very spontaneous ways. And a lot, again, too, it's like a lot of times too, it's like, you talk to people or you do an interview for this or that, or even for a while I was getting invited to go to a lot of different art schools and do lectures or this or that. And you kind of get into this mode of like, oh, well, how do you do this? And, there was never any time in my life where like, oh, I'm going to go on the streets and make these murals. And then in hopes that, galleries will see my work in the streets and then they'll offer me a show in their gallery. It was never, I was just basically following like what I wanted to do. And then like things kind of worked out. There was never any kind of like formula or like end game in my mind, and so, fast forward, to like the last 10 years of like, this whole street art explosion and all this stuff. It's like where you literally see people that had like a strategy. They're like, oh, I'm going to go and plaster Chelsea with my work, and then hopes that the right people see it and this and that and the other. And so it's like, for me, I never really considered myself like a street artist necessarily. I was a graffiti writer, and then I started painting what I would have called what I call murals. And then that kind of led me into doing stuff in galleries, and then so on and so forth. But, it was there was never any kind of like, whatever you want to say, like strategy put in place of like what I was trying to get to, or like some type of end game. And oftentimes now too, I'm very happy that I had like sort of this naive state of mind when it came to all this stuff, because nowadays when I just think about like what it takes to like succeed as an artist in this world, it seems so overwhelming and impossible to me that like had I had any type of realistic grasp on that, like when I was trying to go for that, I think it would have been really discouraging.
It's best not to think about that much at all.
Right.
It sounds like the path, I think about a lot of people who, have migrated between working on the street and doing studio work, or their work is sort of like, moved through different areas and stuff. There's a lot of times people who have that past, like, are really self-conscious about it, or it's like this big.
Right.
It sounds like you just followed the way, You just kind of did your thing, and it took you in all these different routes, and in a way that's a real kind of like beautiful kind of unconscious way of like expressing yourself. You don't have to think too much about like, oh, well, this has got to lead to that, that's got to lead to that. It's just like you're just doing it.
Right. And I think too, I mean, it definitely true, but I definitely would be lying to you if I didn't describe it as a bit of a double-edged sword, and like, it's like I find this so frequently, and I'm sure you probably do too, and most artists do. It's like there's a thing in this, like, whatever, because there's so many different art worlds, but I do believe like, or I do feel like in general, like people want to put you in a box, like you're this guy and I put you right here, and that feels safe to me to put you there, or like, you know what I mean? Or like,
yeah.
And so it's like, for the most part, it's really easy for somebody to just go, oh, you're this street artist guy that does this or that. And it's like, they don't even actually have to deal with like what I actually do or who I actually am. It's just like, it's very safe to say that. And I'm just using myself as an example, but it's like, or like, I skateboard and I put that out there, like this, I'm about this or whatever. And I know so many like artists that are, fairly successful in the art world that they would never let anybody know that they're a skateboarder, or like even ever post that on their social media, or like even show any type of affiliation towards it, because it's like, whatever, it's like, it doesn't go with this persona that they think they need to like maintain, I guess. And right. And I get it, I do get it, because that's how the world works in a lot of ways. And it's but for me, it's like skateboarding, graffiti, like any of these things, they were part of the process that like got me to this place in my life. And I really tend to enjoy the process, or just embrace the process more than anything. Even with my work, it's like I so much more enjoy the process than the product of my work. And, right, yeah. And I always remember, I know I've brought up Barry McGee a couple times in this interview or whatever, this podcast, but, I remember reading from him like a long time ago in this interview. I think it was for a show he did at the Rose Art Museum in Boston or something. They put out this little thing. It was like probably around like 2004 or something. And he wrote how like the same person who, wants to celebrate his painting at the SF MoMA is the same person that's really angry about the tag on the mailbox in front of their house. And like how, and it's this way to separate these two things. And it's like one's part of the process and one's the product. And I really don't feel like it, I really want to embrace the process, and, the product is whatever. I mean, I'm most in my happy place when you're like, in install mode in the gallery versus like that, at the opening, you know what I mean?
Totally. I totally agree with you. And I feel like keeping it honest or just being straightforward is so refreshing. And I think at the end of the day, people, respect that. You know what I mean? Even if they don't think it's their cup of tea or don't agree with the way you live your life or the way you feel about what you feel, there's something to be said for just saying, you know what, this is what I'm into. If you don't like it, oh well, you know what I mean? But this is what lights my fire. And at the end of the day, if we're not motivating ourselves, if it's not our own thing, then what are we doing it for?
Right.
Someone else's expectations. It's almost like a sad way to sort of, be creative, is to let other people drive that bus. Right.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that comes and it comes and goes, but it's also too, it's similar to like, at times I'm sure in your career, and I definitely have experienced it in mine, where like, you make this one painting that everybody wants, and then, the gallery picks up on the fact that everybody wants that type of painting. Yeah. And then it's like, oh, you just make a bunch like this or whatever. And, and like whatever. And there's definitely a repetitive nature in the work I make. I like to make similar looking things that are slightly varied. I find a lot of enjoyment in that. So whatever. But, when it all of a sudden it turns into this thing like where, the people are like, come on, do the thing, it's like, and you're like, no, I don't want to do the thing. It's like, I don't know. It is what it is at the end of the day, but
that's the age old dilemma of like the one hit wonder, or like, the song that everyone likes, play the greatest hit or whatever, and that's just natural human, people like a certain thing, and I think deep down people know that the artist is going to want to push themselves and not beat a dead horse and make the same exact thing over and over again. So that's kind of like our kryptonite,
Right.
The idea of just doing the same painting over and over again. It's like gives me the chills thinking about it. That might be purgatory.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if it's like a real pain in the ass painting, like there's
a tedious one.
Yeah,
like it's like this is the one everyone loves. You got to do it over and over again.
Right.
I've had people ask me to make commissions of work that are like other pieces and a lot of times it is stuff that's complicated or tedious, and I'm just like, can't do it.
Yeah.
Can't go there.
Yeah.
But, well, you got a lot of stuff going on behind you right now. What's all that? Like, talk about what you're working on. I mean, you got some colors, some explosions, and,
I mean, I'm working on one show that's going to open at Haasfeld Gallery in San Francisco right at the end of June,
nice.
Which is a gigantic space there. I've shown there now. This will be my fourth solo show, actually. I've shown there since 2014. So that's one of the main shows I'm working on. And then I am going to be doing a little small show with a gallery here in LA in the next month called Cantor Gallery. It's over in Beverly Hills. And then I have some work that's going to be opening in Shanghai. They're doing I don't know if you've heard of this exhibition. They've done a few versions of it called Beyond the Streets. It's organized by a guy named Roger Gassman. They did one in LA, and then they did one in New York, and now they're doing one in China. And I will have a couple works in there.
Nice.
And then the gallery I work with that's based in Germany, they're opening a brand new big space in Paris, and that opens in the end of March. And I'll also have some work opening there. That gallery is called Gallery Drost. And so that's like the main stuff right now. And then I have a pretty major book coming out at the end of June too, published by Paragon Press, and it'll basically be the last decade's worth of work is in there. Or actually, it's like not even close to all the work, but it's like basically 20 projects from the last 10 years, and that will be out as well.
That's really cool. That's a great opportunity, to have that
yeah.
look back,
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, honestly, too, it's like, really going back through all the work and being forced to like sort of deal with what you did in the past that you really liked, and maybe other things that you didn't like as much, and figuring and editing processes and all that kind of stuff. But it's cool also just to sort of see like this mountain of stuff that you've done. So it's like, I have all this to show for this last 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, right.
But
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always cool to look back, You kind of learn something from it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, too, it's like sometimes you go, like it sparks like ideas. You're like, I forgot about that idea or this or that. And I'm never opposed to like revisiting old ideas, sort of like bringing them into the new,
Seeing it from a new angle, right?
Yeah.
Well, in time, like everything post-COVID is now new. It's different. It means something else, Like our whole perspective is like completely altered. But that's inevitable. I think it's just sometimes it's more clear than other times.
Yeah.
But
I listened to a couple of your podcasts like during sort of more of the thick of the COVID stuff.
Oh, it got gritty.
It's interesting though, because it's like when you listen to it and then you kind of can flash back to like that moment and like where your brain was at, and then you're like in this moment now it's very different, but like it's like I listen to those conversations and I'm immediately like, oh shit, I remember this, like, and and it's some of it just seems so like almost like funny at this point, like because we were just so clueless about like what was going on, you know what I mean? Right. And so like, it's like who didn't have like a bunch of rubber gloves in their car and like
scrubbing down groceries.
It's like, and like leaving your house in your car with like that James Bond fucking music playing like in your head, done like Mission Impossible or whatever. Like it's, I mean, and
it was real though. I mean, we didn't know what the hell was going on, and it really affected people.
And I think it's still real too. I mean, I think it seems like there's some type of a vibe going on right now where people are acting like it's over, but I don't know. I don't know if it's over. I don't know.
It's not over, but at least it was really grim in those early days. So I mean, and then having a kid who goes to school, just them going to school is a blessing, because being locked up in a room on a computer for 2 years is not the best thing for social engagement and growth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It might have been stifled a little.
Yeah. And, but,
we
were lucky. We found a sort of like a tutor nanny lady that would mostly do a lot of the school with our child. But I did do it for the first, like, the first semester of like whatever, when it first cracked off, and then that whole first semester, it was crazy. I mean, sitting there acting like you're a teacher, I don't know.
It's tough, man. I don't know that we signed up for that gig.
Yeah.
Oh, well, everyone had to do it.
Yeah.
I do have one last question for you, and that is what is the album or the musician that you're really into right at the moment?
Wow. I mean, I might have to say
it can be embarrassing.
No.
It's okay if it's Taylor Swift.
No, it's not embarrassing at all. I know a lot of times you get thick into the music stuff, so I was happy about that. But like, I really, really, I guess if I'm going to just put one out there that I'm really, really, really passionate about, it's a band from New York City called Show Me the Body. And
never heard of them.
Oh yeah. They're like, I kind of learned about this band maybe 3 years ago now, and I actually did get to see them live here in LA, like pre-pandemic. But it's like a really amazing group of guys. They have this label called Corpus, and there's several different bands, but they do all this community related work as well. And I just really, really, the music is like some of my favorite music I've heard in a long time. And it's funny too, because I like a lot of times too now it's like I hear these bands and I'm like, and I don't know if it's like I've been around so long and I know so much.
Old.
Yeah, but then you're like, I hear parts of this band that I like and parts of this band that I like and parts of this band, but it doesn't feel like, that's a ripoff. It's just like somehow they like combined all these elements to make this thing that's totally different than any of the stuff that I'm hearing, but it's really quite fascinating to me. There's another band I'm super kind of stoked on too, called Black Country New Road, and I think they're from the UK, and you'd probably dig them. I mean, they definitely have hints of like Rachel's and Juna 44 and Slint little bit of Archer's a Loaf. There's just so many different, like, I made a post about this like on my stories on my Instagram like last week, because they have a kind of a newish record out, and it's really a amazing record. And I said, these guys, they pickpocketed every one of my favorite angular rock bands from Chicago in the 90s and made something amazing. And it's like,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So
it's cool, and it's weird. Like sometimes I'll hear math rock, like a band like from Japan today who does like math rock.
Oh, it's huge. It's huge over there.
It's kind of strange. But it's really cool to like sort of see the second cycle.
Yeah.
Outside of the fact that it does make you feel aged.
Yeah, for sure. But
you know what I'm going to do after this?
What's that?
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on Captain Jazz cover of "Take on Me" by
Oh, nice.
I love
that.
It never fails.
Yeah.
It always hits the spot. It's such a great track.
Yeah, love it. Got to see it played live several times. So
I never saw him live. I mean, I saw Promise Ring and all that. I was playing around that time, but I never saw Captain Jazz live. I came to it during the Joan of Arc era. So
yeah.
Yep. I can't imagine the energy and the testosterone in the room and the sweat and the stink in one of those shows.
Well, what was funny is like, I think it was like, I'm trying to remember the year. It must have been around 2010. They did a reunion tour.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
how was that?
They were actually really, really good. They played at this crazy ass place in North Beach in San Francisco, and I'm forgetting what the name of this place is, but oftentimes people call it, it's like you're on the Love Boat, because like it has like waiters that wear like white coats and ties, and then they had this Cap'n Jazz show there, and it was sold out. It was insane. And and it definitely kind of like took me back, but I was like kind of like on a certain level, I was like, whoa, yeah, there's a lot of dudes up in here. Like,
right, yeah. You realize, this is the clientele.
Yeah.
But I imagine the energy couldn't have been at that raw, early...
No,
those early shows must have just been like a powder keg of energy.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I used to go see, like, Don Cab shows.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, the energy of those are just, like, it's... You'd want to bottle that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I love that band too. I got to see them several times as well, but like, they're phenomenal in my opinion too. In the live show, Damon Che is a character, and
an animal.
Yeah. Hey, I realized you were from Pittsburgh actually, and I was going to bring that up. Because a lot of people, they're like, oh yeah, they're not, like, some people think they're from Louisville, and other people think they're from Chicago, and like they're very much from Pittsburgh. It
sounds like steel mills. You know what I mean? I feel like they encapsulate the sound of that city.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, This is great to talk to you. I mean, so you have those shows coming up, and where people can follow what you're up to is you do social media.
I just mostly put stuff out on Instagram, and that's just at A Schoultz, ASCHOULTZ, but which is art, skateboarding mostly, some music stuff.
Right.
But
yeah, I noticed lots of skating.
Yeah. It's still out there,
which is good.
Yeah,
you're staying active.
Yeah, definitely. But
cool, man. Well, I'm looking forward to eventually too seeing the work in New York.
Yeah, I'm supposed to be doing a show in September at Halsey McKay in the Hamptons. So
Ryan, there you go.
Yeah,
sounds great.
Yeah.
Get out there for that for sure.
Yeah, and but yeah, thanks for having me on, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
awesome.
it was great to meet, and thanks for doing it.